find it invigorating and interesting. I find it fascinating. I'm the only person who's ever had this very specific crime committed upon.
This guy's, listen, one of the most familiar faces of all time because he was in one of the most popular movies of all time. And you think that was, over 30 years ago. It's unbelievable to me. He's working on so many other projects. He writes novels. He has a trilogy out, all this kind of stuff. And we're going to learn about him now. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome Crispin Glover. How you doing, Crispin?
Great. Thank you for having me. How are you doing?
Good, thank you, man.
Good.
I'm really good. You're so youthful looking. Are you told that a lot? Do you age?
Sometimes people tell me that. I see myself aging, but I'm happy if people think I have a youthful appearance.
It's as if you just shot Back to the Future yesterday, and your hair. What do you do to your hair? It's perfect.
Well, I often cut my hair myself.
No, you don't.
Yeah, I really do.
Just to save on some money?
No, it's just I get involved in doing what I'm doing. I've been doing it since the 80s. I have a wall razor, an electric razor. I know how to do it. I mean, it's better when somebody else does it. If I'm working on a film, somebody else will cut my hair. Sometimes I get a proper haircut, but it's more just like I'm not thinking about it, and then I've got the thing at my house, and I can do it, so why not do it?
And Crispin, you're so freshly shaven, smooth skin. Do you use oils or cream? Or is it just the California air? What is it out?
Well, I mean, I try to eat healthily and exercise, and
so you take care of yourself. Now, you have an independent company there called Volcanic Eruptions.
Yeah.
And you work on some great movies. You have 2 of a trilogy done that you've been working on over almost a decade, correct?
Well, actually, more than a decade. I started shooting the first film, which is titled What Is It, 1996.
Wow.
Yeah. It took me 9.5 years from the first day of shooting that to having it premiere in Sundance in 2005. And I've been touring with that film and then the second film, It Is Fine, Everything Is Fine, which premiered in Sundance in 2007. I'm on my 11th year of touring with What Is It? This is my 10th year anniversary of being at the Egyptian Theater, the American Cinematheque in Los Angeles, which I'll have March 18th and 19th. And I was there. I didn't go to LA or New York in the first year I toured. I wanted to make sure things worked out with touring in 2005. So I started my 10th year anniversary last year, and I'm continuing it this year with some of the venues that I'm returning to. Well, I've been to this venue a number of times, to the American Cinematheque.
Wow, and when it comes to these movies, Crispin Glover, what do you think it is about them, and maybe describe them to the listening audience who hasn't seen them, or maybe perhaps not even heard of them, that makes them so intriguing that people will go back year after year to watch screenings, even though it's a film, as you said, that's done now, almost 2 decades ago.
Yeah. What is it specifically? Most of the actors in the film have Down syndrome, but the film is not about Down syndrome at all. What it really is my psychological reaction to the corporate constraints that have happened in the last 30 or more years of filmmaking, wherein anything that can possibly make an audience member uncomfortable is necessarily excised. And this is a very damaging thing, I think, to the culture, because when people are asking questions, they're learning something. The breakdown of the word education is to learn from within. And for corporate interests to ubiquitously excise the possibility of anybody asking a question about a movie, it leads to non-education, or more accurately, the opposite of education is propaganda. It's educated in a specific fashion, which would be called propaganda.
So we don't have an opportunity to truly learn. Is that what you're saying?
Everything that we are seeing in films is corporately funded and corporately distributed. I'm very pleased with what's happening right now, with the political campaign with Bernie Sanders. And even before that, I was very pleased with what was happening with the Occupy movement, because I recognized that what I was started reacting to 20 years ago with the film What Is It? It's exactly what people are seeing in the United States, and why they're reacting positively to the Bernie Sanders campaign is because he's pointing out what is very true is that corporate interests are hurting the lower and middle classes. I was talking about exactly the same thing, although mine had to do with the messages that were being put forth in corporate filmmaking, which is everything that you're seeing streaming or released in movie theaters or on television. It's corporate interest that is funding it and distributing it. This means they understand that if an audience is educated in a particular fashion that would be learning to question, corporations are in place because we supposedly live in a democratic society. If people are informed and educated that corporations are unfairly taking advantage of the lower and middle classes, they would vote so that corporations no longer are able to have impact politically and working against the best interests of the people that are voting, the politicians that are being legally bribed at this point in time. And I mean, it's slightly differentiated because I was reacting to the corporate interests influence in that which was being put forth in the storytelling and the moral value of the storytelling. But what Bernie Sanders is letting be known is that it's hurting the political laws that are favoring corporations monetarily and disfavoring lower and middle classes.
So I guess, you trying to make a point 20 years ago and still doing it through this trilogy, you must be really pleased then with the advancement of something like the internet, say, where people now have a voice. And we can go in forums and chat rooms or Facebook groups.
I'm feeling the difference.
Yes.
Like when I first started touring in 2005, the internet was already around, but if I would utter the word propaganda, especially in the United States, I toured in Canada as well, I could feel a sharp differentiation between the U.S. and Canada.
We're more advanced.
Well, what is true, though, is that the Canadians knew that the United States had a very particular form of propaganda because it was a different situation going up in Canada.
Would you say that Canada's maybe more of a compassionate nation? Would you?
Well, I don't know. I don't know it well enough. But I do know that there's a different form of propaganda going on in the United States. And the United States, particularly in 2005, what I was starting to say, I could feel that people were upset in the audience when I was talking about this stuff. Like, how dare you say this? Now I can feel that people are, propaganda, where we see that this is true, and that's happening because of the internet, which makes me so pleased because I felt kind of alone on some levels about it.
Now, on the
Not
extreme
totally alone. I mean, people always knew about it, but it's more people in general are starting to really on the tip of their tongue.
Crispin Glover, thank you again for joining us here on the program. When you speak of Bernie Sanders, a lot of people go, hope, inspiration, we're making a difference, there's change. On the extreme end, there's Donald Trump. Now, this must infuriate you.
I mean, there's a part of me, I hate politics in general.
Okay.
The only reason I talk about this stuff is because I saw it influencing art, which I cared very deeply about. I stay relatively informed, and so I can see this stuff. I can see why there's a popularity with Donald Trump because he's not coming from the corrupted political system.
Interesting.
The only thing is, of course, Donald Trump is coming from a monetary elite, which Bernie Sanders is very much reacting to, and I do think that there's a problem with the control that's coming from that 1% essentially that's imbalanced. So I hate being an actor talking about politics. I care about
now you're
art.
a producer. You're a producer
I'm
now.
a filmmaker.
So
I'm a filmmaker, and it is something that I get passionate about.
And I guess really what you're saying, Crispin, is that, you know what? People don't get caught up in just the norm. Let's make sure that we never lose our creative expression.
Yes,
and do it through
individuality.
And that's what you're doing through It Is Fine, Everything Is Fine, and you're also doing it through What Is It? And then are you working on It Is Mine? Is this a third part of the movie?
There is a third part of the film, but what I'll be showing also at the Egyptian, I also perform a live show before each of 8 different profusely illustrated books. It's an hour-long show that is, I dramatically narrate these books that are heavily illustrated. The images of the books are projected behind me. I took old books from the 1800s and reworked them into different books from what they originally were.
Wow, what a brain on you. You're such a fascinating individual.
This was something I did in the 80s. I did these a long time ago. I have some here.
Is any of this drug influenced, or is this just how you work? This is just your brain is eclectic and artistic. You've really opened up your mind, haven't you?
Well, I always drew. I always wrote stories. And when I was 19, I started making these books. I took old books from the 1800s and reworked them into different books from what they originally were. I've published 4 of them all together.
These are beautiful.
Yeah, I'm very proud of these books.
They're little mini art pieces, too.
Yeah,
They're great little, yes.
That's right. As you can see, virtually every page has some kind of illustration.
Wow.
So I dramatically...
We'll take pictures and tweet them out. We're so advanced. We're taking now we're taking it to a whole new generation.
That's right. I have a new book which I don't have in hand right now.
Okay.
Because I haven't published a book since 1995.
Okay.
And I'm publishing a new book, and I'll have them at the shows.
In this day and age, my favorite thing is that everyone still has a voice, especially through social media. So do you get active on the social media now to make sure that you plug and promote this stuff?
Yeah.
And do you find that, Crispin, that your fans are real dedicated to you and your message? Or are you getting new kind of fans every day?
I get, certain way, I get asked like what kind of people come to my shows, and I mean I think they're people that are looking. They're
probably not going to a Kanye concert or something right after.
I'm not that they wouldn't be normal people either. But I get families coming to the shows, and I wouldn't call them family shows. No one under 18 is allowed because of the content of the films. They're adult films in the best sense of the word. It's not. It's something that is good for adults to be processing.
You're making sure that people don't lose a vision. Don't just get manipulated by the bigger public. Make sure, and that's what you show. It's true art.
What I find is that the people that come to the shows already are usually kind of on that thought process. People are parched for kind of thoughtful material.
Yeah.
And there's a market for it. Well, I think corporate interests are missing out. That's why I call it propaganda, is because on some level it's known they do not want to be letting people think for themselves, because that can be bad for corporate interest of itself. I'm not actually 100% against corporations. It's just they're out of balance right now. Corporations is just a group of people getting together to do something, which can be great. It's not 100% negative. It's just there's an out of balance in what's being represented.
I agree with you. And I think most
tyranny.
would. When you go and sit down and have these kind of real open conversations, I think a lot of sort of the good messages are just PR messages for corporations. But you're right. What are we influencing? What kind of society? What next generation are we growing? Are we making sure that they're going to have these open minds?
And the current generation, I mean, people are truly monetarily impacted because of an economic situation, which is what Bernie Sanders is talking about. I'm so glad that's resonating with people. What has happened is there's been a redistribution of wealth from the middle and lower classes to a small percentage.
For sure. At the end of the day, I think if you're not a human being out there, and we won't get too political, that doesn't want to make sure that you see a more of a some kind of equal balance there between the rich and the poor.
I'm not sure, but I believe often I would be taxed higher myself personally.
Sure, you did well.
I'm in that. I don't know every year, but some years I'm in that tax bracket where I would be taxed more. I don't care. It's like I want
help out people.
Well, it's not just. It's actually selfish. I just want to be able to walk down the street and everybody's happy. Like it makes me feel better. Certain way, it just makes you feel better if everybody is doing
that's okay.
I mean, because literally,
and maybe safer.
Well, sure, yeah. It just makes it's obvious that and humans ultimately are social animals. They originally were hunter-gatherers, and the only thing that would excommunicate somebody is if they were not being cooperative within the culture. So it's just a matter of figuring out what is truly cooperative and going to be helping people at large. If I'm making a certain amount of money, I can be taxed, and it makes my quality of life better if just going down the street, people are feeling better at large.
I love that thought, Crispin Weber. I really do. Now, unfortunately, we don't have a ton of time. I think Alex Winter might be popping in here soon.
Oh, I know him.
He's another filmmaker. I got all these great filmmakers on the program today. He's trying to do a Frank Zappa documentary. I have to ask about, speaking of movies of old, Back to the Future.
Yes.
Now, I apologize. This is probably something you've done and been inundated with millions of times.
Yeah.
You were in the original,
right?
Which is now even past that date of the second one. It's like there's no
Yes.
more there's no more Back to the Future at all. We're past it all. We're only in the future. There was a fallout there.
I wouldn't call it a fallout, but what happened was there was no contract made. I didn't have a contract for the second film. They made the second film a number of years after the first film. There was no agreement reached, and so the producers took the mold of my face that was made for the old age makeup in the first film, and they put cast from my nose, cheekbones, and chin prosthetics onto another actor in order to make the actor look like me, and then intersplice that with a little bit of footage of me, for a very small amount of footage of me from the other film, and had the other actor look at my performance and then do impressions of me. Now, if you do
He should have won an Oscar for that.
well, it was specifically, it's really not funny. What he did was illegal as well. He wasn't part of the lawsuit. He was a witness. But technically, what an impressionist does, or a political satirist does, or a satirist of any kind, is they're letting the audience know that this is a version of somebody else and they're making fun of it, whatever, making a joke, which is legal, and that's fine. And there's an important communication that comes from that. What is illegal is to fool an audience into believing that somebody is actually doing something that they do not have
Pawning
a
off
contract.
your character as someone else completely.
Well, but my facial
Your
features.
facial features, yeah.
that were taken from the molds.
So
of
when did
my
the
face.
lawsuit happen?
Early 90s.
And what was the result of the lawsuit?
I have to be careful about how I word it, but
Okay.
it was settled with mutual satisfaction.
Okay.
But because of the lawsuit, there are rules in the Screen Actors Guild that make it so producers, directors, and actors can never do anything
Set a
like
precedent.
that again. Yeah.
That's got to feel good.
Well, I would have preferred that the producers never did that in the first
Why
place.
didn't they just ask you in the fucking movie?
Well, there was a negotiation, but it gets very. I am writing a book right now. I'm on page 325 that has to do with propaganda, and it's complicated, and it actually has something to do with that. I had not been given the screenplay before I auditioned with what's called a side.
I don't know what that means.
It's just a scene in the movie. So I didn't read the screenplay, and I was, because they, at the time, the early 80s, they were concerned about that ideas could get out. And I was 20 years old. They offered the part to me, and I said, great. I was excited. It was a good part. But or so I was told. I actually my agent told me that I was going to be playing an older character. I didn't know that until after I was offered the part. And I said, wow, this is great. Fantastic. Sign me up. But they had not given me the screenplay until I was already involved in the film. I had been trained as an actor, of course, to understand the psychology of the character and see what the background is, and also understand what the audience is going to be feeling about something. There were complexities. There were different drafts of the script, and there are certain things that I asked about, and I'm assuming that I wasn't the only person that asked about that were changed. There were some things, but one of the leftovers of what wasn't changed was there was a monetary reward that I said I thought that if we have a monetary reward or a material reward, that it ends up giving a message of that money equals happiness, which I said I thought was a bad message. And that I think did not resonate well in the long run. And then when the negotiation came about, they almost were they were trying to make it as though, they were mad at me for doing it. So then they offered me less than half of any of the other.
That's the business side of shit.
Well, it's not good business.
It's not ethical.
It's a cruel way to go about something.
I could not concur with you more.
My agents and it was evident that this was what was being done, and so we didn't reach an agreement. They did something illegal, and that was really not right.
Fascinates me that they would even do that. You think about how much money they were probably making with those movies also, that it probably would pale in comparison to even
It
think
was not.
that way.
It was not a good business decision, I would say. It was not. It was not a proper material business decision.
Is it sad for you in a way, though, years and years and years later now, that you're in this original and it's such a legendary series?
Well, no,
it really is.
I never look back and go, oh, this is terrible or whatever. I like that I have a perspective.
Ah.
I find it invigorating and interesting. I find it fascinating. I'm the only person who's ever had this very specific crime committed upon. There's nobody I can talk to that says, "Oh yeah, I know what you're talking about."
Are you still wearing the mask today? Is that why you look so young, Crispin Glover? Is that okay? Are you still wearing that? No,
this is me.
This is you.
The Todd Shapiro Show on Canada Laughs, Sirius XM Channel 168.
Hey, what's up? I'm Roddy. Subscribe to our channel. You're going to love it. For the rest of this episode, you got to check out our podcast online on the website. Go check it out.